It's not get a crystal ball out and control your entire future. It's the understanding that through doing things, you will learn experientially, and that you'll be able to incorporate that and hone things. Or even if you test a hypothesis and it's faulty, you've learned something. That's a successful experiment.
Welcome to the Be It Till You See It podcast, where we talk about taking messy action, knowing that perfect is boring. I'm Lesley Logan, Pilates instructor and fitness business coach. I've trained thousands of people around the world, and the number one thing I see stopping people from achieving anything is self-doubt. My friends, action brings clarity, and it's the antidote to fear. Each week, my guests will bring bold, executable, intrinsic, and targeted steps that you can use to put yourself first and be it till you see it. It's a practice, not a perfect. Let's get started. All right, be it babes. I'm excited. Okay, I'll be honest. I was like, okay, a skeptical shaman. I'm a little skeptical about a skeptical shaman. What does that mean? Are they really skeptical? Are they? And they are. They being Rachel White, our guest today. First of all, there's never anything that's random. The timing of this woman being in our lives, in your ears right now, it's really cool. And she said so many gems that have everything to apply to your life that are not necessarily around tarot or astrology or any of that stuff. And so whether you are like someone who's like, oh, a shaman, and like that's a turnoff for you, stop, keep listening. She is awesome. We talk about the journey for her switching careers. We talk about the journey in like being a small business owner, in having to make decisions that like not everyone's going to like, and also intuition and allowing, and there's some stuff on digital detox in there. So this is a really great episode. Get your notepads out, have some fun, and then also make sure you check out all of her amazing things if any of these things intrigued you, because I am. As soon as I get off this, I am. So here is Rachel White. All right, be it babe. I'm actually really excited and intrigued by today's guest. I'm not going to lie. There are certain things I've dabbled in as a one woo girl in this world. Like I do have some crystals, but I also like to think of myself as like pretty logical about some things. And I do have some tarot cards, but I also am like, okay, but life. And so when today's guest came across my plate, I was like, oh, well, I've always been a little skeptical about a shaman. So why not have Rachel White, the skeptical shaman, in our group today? So will you tell everyone who you are and what you do?
Of course. Yeah. And it's funny because people see skepticism as inherently in opposition to spirituality, but I don't. And I think how you just described yourself is personally what I perceive most people are. And they're very underserved by the crystal hippie people. And I also have crystals, but there's a certain archetype. So yeah, my name's Rachel White. There you go. Yeah. I own a spiritual practice called Totem Readings. And I have a new podcast called The Skeptical Shaman. And the whole basis of the show is conversations with all different kinds of people: cynics, skeptics, true believers, different faith systems, some of them seemingly quite crazy. Like I had a Catholic exorcist on. I thought that was an interesting discussion because to me, curiosity and skepticism are like, they're two sides of the discernment coin. You don't get anywhere without being curious. And as a part of curiosity, you're like, and what's in that? What's this? And what really is that? And most people prefer to navigate life that way. And yet when you enter the world of woo, sometimes people make you feel like it's very binary, like it's all or nothing, and it's just not the case. I'm glad you're doing it the way you're doing it.
Thank you. I'm always here for the affirmations. Those are my love language. But I thank you. I love that you point that out, because so I live in Las Vegas, which I think is a really interesting place to live. It's got lots of there's something for everybody here for sure on any side of any coin. But I remember going to this one event and they were speaking in a language that I heard the words. I heard them. They're all words that are like in my English vocabulary, but the order in which they were coming out, I was like, what are they saying? And I kind of just felt like, I was like, but I love breath work. I love my crystals. I love a new moon. I don't understand what you're saying. And I was like, maybe this isn't my place. Or I think your point, like sometimes some places are it's very like you're all in or you're not. And I'm like, no, I still have to go into my world where I pay a mortgage. The credit card doesn't care if Mercury's in retrograde.
No, it
So
does. And that's if a teacher, a spiritual teacher, a coach, anybody is working with you, but they're not empowering you to make it pragmatically actionable in your life and making your life better, whatever that looks like, they're not really doing much for you.
yeah.
It's a bunch of gobbledygook. And what you just described is something that's referred to as word salad, just so you know. And it's designed to make people feel kind of stupid, like maybe they don't understand. And it's a disempowering gatekeeping mechanism a lot of the time. And I spent over 2 decades in corporate outsourcing and real estate, by the way, as I was working on Totem off the side of my desk. And this, what I'm going to say next, holds true for business, for corporate, for spirituality. If someone can't explain something to you in human scaled language so you understand it, it's a bit of a red flag. They may not understand it. They might be trying to spin you out and like snake charm you, or they want to sound really smart and they want to condescend to you. Because most people that are good communicators, they just cut to the chase. You understand them. Yeah.
Okay. Love you and that for all of that. So I want to go back to like, first of all, because you just said you were in real estate and you were doing tone side. How did you get into this? Did it find you? Were you like, what was like, I'm ready to leave the corporate world? How did that go?
So like most people I know who are legitimate psychics, mediums, whatever you want to call us. And by the way, don't get hung up on all that. It really kind of doesn't matter. I was very psychic, and then I pushed that to the side, became a pretty smug atheist, right? So I just like logic. I like things that make sense. And a lot of what I saw of religion, so I grew up Catholic, was like fairy tale nonsense thinking. It just, they were using a lot of thought terminating cliches, and no one was using a lot of critical thinking. So I kind of threw the baby out with the bathwater. And then I had an experience that sent me into exploration mode. Because the whole point of like, if you're curious and you're skeptical, you have to let in new data, even if that new data is woo. That's a part of it. And I was like, oh, I have to reframe things. I was wrong, right? And I have to add new stuff to my repertoire. So I studied it, and then started just doing it off the side of my desk, seeing clients on weekends. I had always read tarot cards. So that was sort of the first thing I brought in to my practice, which people don't think of as classically shamanic, but it is. Divination is a part of it. And then in March of 2020, transitioned to doing this work full time. And it's funny, corporate real estate is not doing well. And it's one of those areas where intuition should serve you. And I just saw the writing on the wall. Like, and it wasn't just COVID, trust me. It's not just office spaces and people working from home. There's a whole bunch of things going on. And it would have been misery the last 3 years, I think. And so, I pulled tarot cards. I kept getting the death card, which is not bad, by the way. It just means like, let it go. It's dead. Everybody tells you you're dead. It's time to lie down. And it's scary as a rational person I have moments, less so now, but like last year, I'd be in the backyard, go like, oh my God, I make my living. I'm a tarot card reader. Like, what did I do? And you'll have those little, and they go real fast. They leave as quickly as they came, but it's a wild experience. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand that. There's like certain times in my life I can tell when I truly listened, like to the intuition, to these like, and I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I do feel like the more we listen to our intuition, the more psycho we all are. We just often don't want to, or we pull ourselves the other way. We try to talk ourselves out of that intuition. Maybe someone told you, you were wrong sometime. But the reason why we even live in Las Vegas right now is because of one of those moments in 2020 where someone said something and my gut said something and I was like, oh, it's time to move. And if we hadn't moved then, I'm sure we would have done something else amazing. We would not be exactly where we are today because a month later, we could not live in this neighborhood that we're in right now. We couldn't have afforded it. We couldn't have made that switch. As I'm a Pilates instructor, like the reality, and you're like, when you strip away all the things that make us who we are, you're like, and the title of this thing that I do is not something that people would think is a reliable job of any kind.
But what is a reliable job now? And that was the other reason I transitioned. So most of my clients are like high functioning executives, business owners, lawyers, professionals, whatever it is. And there's so much turmoil and churn in the workforce across industries, geographies. I have clients all over the world. And the new thing, I had a client, she works at a very prestigious technology company and is quite high up there. She said, I understand now that the side hustle is the hedge against the market. And for her, she's an astrologer, really. And she's
Mm.
like, it would have seemed insane to me a couple of years ago. And now I'm like, that somehow feels more steady than even where I am. Because there's no more rules, by the way. Her coworker was let go via email giving birth on maternity leave, which is illegal. You know, labor law wise, they don't care
Yeah,
anymore.
they're like, well, then fight us in court because that's probably cheaper
And
than
she was
paying you.
a top performer, just
Oh,
won a big award, and it didn't matter because it's not a meritocracy. Up is down. It's a lot of chaos. So what I would say to people is the myth of the steady, reliable, safe job. It's not safe anymore.
mm-hmm.
Number one, doesn't mean you have to be crazy like me and do what I do for a living, but getting into something that is a passion, even if it's just a hobby for a while, getting certifications, exploring other things, developing skills, listening to your intuition in those areas, it's a really smart move,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I thank you for sharing that. And we don't have to go off on this tangent, but I was talking with a girlfriend of mine. We both bought a house in the same year, and the amount of proof, like I was like, buying your first house is like
Oh my
the
God, I
hardest
know.
thing you've ever done when you work for yourself. And I'm like, I've been working for myself for 15 years. Excuse me, bank. If anyone can prove they can make money and be consistent, look at me.
Right.
There is no guarantee that if I had a regular job, I would still have it for all of those
Yeah.
15 years. No way. But every single day, the bank's like, oh, we prefer the person who's working for a company than the
Right.
person who's working for themselves. And it can be infuriating and frustrating. And luckily for me, on most days, it lights a fire under my ass. But like, let me just show you. Let me just prove you a different. Not that they're paying attention,
Yes.
but I'm like, let me just prove you that you don't know what you're talking about. Because I can bet on myself every single day when I can't bet on an employer that I've had.
You can't anymore. And part of the work of developing intuition, getting to know yourself that way, because I do think it's sort of a perishable skill up to a
Mm-hmm.
point. Like my husband's a chef,
Yeah.
right? And if he doesn't cook, if he's not doing mise en place and practicing his knife skills, they dull. And I
Mm.
do think like using intuition and developing that muscle memory with it throughout life so that you're ready for those moments. You're ready for like the buying of the home and that challenge, or you're ready for the corporate layoff or whatever the crazy
Yeah.
thing is that's coming. It's not the first time you're like doing a gut check.
Yeah. Okay. So
Yeah.
can I ask you, because I'm sure my listener, like, they're like nodding and they're like, okay,
Yeah.
but as the perfectionists and overachievers we tend to attract on this show, what are some signs that it is their intuition that's talking to them and not like someone else's story that they've picked up?
Right. Yeah. The number one thing I do, and this might not be for everybody, but there might be a version of this. So
Mhm.
anyone listening to this, convert this to your thing. I pull a tarot card, and tarot doesn't tell me what to do. It doesn't tell anyone what to do. And, I have my own deck and all of that. And even then I go, no, no, no. It's meant to facilitate your own work. And I will pull a single card in the morning for several days at a time. If I'm handling sort of a situation or assessing options, and I
Mm.
go to look for the consistency in the theme and what it triggers in me. Like when you take standardized tests, they always tell you the first answer you think of is usually the right one.
Yeah.
And I take that direction. And then the other thing, the second layer of that is how much of this is fear and frankly using logic. So like
Mm.
let's say I stay where I'm working, right? Let's follow that thought exercise all the way through.
Okay.
How much am I in control? Like how much safer is this really? And getting really objective about it,
Mm.
even writing it down on paper, really thinking through it. And then the third layer, which is a little bit more shamanic because we're disturbed people, is, one day I'm going to die. And that's
Mhm.
sort of, it seems morose, but it's actually a great way to prioritize what you're doing and what's fear versus what is excitement and how to assess all that. And I can honestly say I'm 40 right now. I'm going to have, at least on my trajectory right now, probably very few regrets in terms of, I don't think I'm going to feel like I didn't take risks that were meaningful, if that
Mhm.
makes sense.
Mhm. Mhm.
And just doing, like letting yourself do things. I know so many people who go, well, I wish I could write a book, but I have a job. And I'm like, everybody's got a job. I got a job. You can
Mhm.
still write a book. You
Mhm.
can, like these things, you can do them. It's
Mhm.
okay. But I'm also not one of those people, there's so many life coaches that say crazy, shit, in my
Yeah.
opinion. And one of the things I'll hear from people is they go, well, I was told that if I don't quit my job, the universe won't give me my next thing. And I'm like, no, 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 make money until you figure it out. What are you talking about? Like, God
Yeah.
doesn't show up when you just empty your calendar.
Yeah. No,
That's wild.
you, yeah, you know, that like leap in the net will appear. And I was just like,
Yeah.
I like, yeah, there are some things like I do joke that like I do a lot of things like I'm on a roller coaster and I'm doing it scared. Like because
Yeah.
I don't know the other side of things. But I remember like, I think it was Brene Brown or somebody she was talking to said, I hate that line. I kind of think of it like, what would I be willing to do this even if the net didn't appear? And like, that's kind of
That's
an easier, because it's
solid.
like, if I'm not willing to do it, if the net doesn't appear, maybe, maybe I'm not
Yes.
there yet. But if I'm like, you know what, I got to do it no matter what happens, that's something I have to
Yeah.
experience. Then, you know, you're not going to live your life with regret.
And
you know?
that's a passion and that's intentional. But
Mm-hmm.
people being like, I don't know what it is yet, but as long as I got this job paying me money, I'm not going to find out. I'm like, I don't know that that's how the scavenger hunt works. Right. So there's a happy medium. And, you know, I started a podcast, and as you know, it costs money.
No, yeah.
Right. You have to have a little bit of faith that something works out. The biggest predictor for me is just, do I want to do it right now? It's because I touch that intuition muscle a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I call it like witch vibe. You get witch vibe about stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I've just done it, and it has that almost a somatic physical feeling to it,
Mm-hmm.
it always works out. And
Yeah.
so if you practice this, you'll learn and you get more comfortable. And generally speaking, if people are good at something, they can recreate that success.
Yeah.
You know, if they're
Yeah.
successful in a relationship and then, you know, something happens, they can have another great relationship. Same with businesses,
Yeah.
creative projects. Yeah.
I agree. And I think like, even what I'm just hearing you say is like, the questions you ask yourself when you pull a card, these are things like, is anyway, you can do it as a journaling thing. You can do it as like a talking to yourself thing, but it's kind of like, it's not, it's getting like a 30,000 foot view and being a little bit more clinical around yourself versus it's not talking to another friend to get your intuition. It's being with yourself to get your intuition.
Or
muscle.
listening to the fear. You know, one of the gifts of like tarot or a lot of these modalities is you'll pull a card. In my case, it was the death card. And at the time, my deck was a prototype deck. This was my version of the death card, which is Anubis. It's the Egyptian god of death. And I would tell myself like, okay, that's really interesting. That's a big card. And you don't judge it. And you just kind of sit with it. And people can journal, or I always like to see how the day goes, how I'm feeling, what I'm noticing around me. And there was a massive reorganization at work. They were trying to get acquired by another big company I used to work for before that. And so you'll pull the card, and it might seem silly in a vacuum, right? That little noise in your head will be like, well, it's just a random card. And then you observe what's manifesting in reality, and you go, okay, that's not that random. Writing's on the wall. And, you know, using it as a means of getting access to your own spiritual data is how I look at that. And, you know, pulling a card at the beginning of the day, even when you're not in a situation, living your day, coming back and looking at it and reflecting on how that manifested for me. So you build your own language with cards or runes or whatever you want to use. It doesn't really matter.
I mean, I think like it kind of goes even into the idea of like, we see evidence for which we believe to be true all the time. You know, like if we want to, our whole brain is like, let me prove myself right all the time. And so what it sounds like you're doing is like, in a way of like dilemma intuition is like kind of putting a piece of evidence out there and then allowing the day to unfold and just seeing how we interact with evidence or how that, like, what is that coming back to? And then reflecting on the end of the day. I can't think of a better way to come up with your, like, develop your intuition muscle or spend time with yourself, because I feel like you get to end up being through your day more present as opposed to the day happening to you.
And it's not a bunch of work. It's not, you know, doing DMT in Bali or like, you know, it's a minimal requirement because most of the people I work with and myself were busy. And I'm not one of those people where you have to like give an arm and a leg and do all this crazy. It's because it's like a diet. If it's not sustainable, you're going to have a hard time.
Yeah.
And it's in the sustaining of it where you're really going to get that value, right? And yeah, pulling a card, Carl Jung loved tarot. And my deck is very archetypal and Jungian. And he would use it with his clients, a bit like a Rorschach, but around archetypes, and a way of just getting you out of your own myopic nonsense
Mhm.
and going like, oh, that's interesting. I don't understand that. And then living your day and going, I totally understand that now.
Yeah.
I understand why that showed up.
Yeah.
And then next time, maybe a year from then, you pull a card and you go, I know what's going to happen today.
Yeah.
And you have that confidence. And it's rooted in, I mean, it's not a scientific experiment, right? But it's like a little bit of a control experiment you can run in your own life. You have a hypothesis and you test it.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm kind of now, I want to know at what point does somebody go, I need a skeptical shaman. I need a shaman. Like how, why, because you do have cards. So,
Yeah.
I could just use your cards. Like at what point am I like,
Yeah.
okay, I need someone like you in my actual life regularly, or is it
Well,
regular? Is it just at a moment in
yeah.
time?
I'm sort of notorious for not wanting people to come back a lot. And so I took my time building my practice on purpose because I set certain intentions. And one of them was, I don't want to be one of those people who's like, I need to see you every week.
Yeah.
The cards stay the same. I had a client push on it during COVID and finally I was like, you know what? It's fine. Come back in. It was just a few months after her reading. I usually tell people to wait like 8, 9, 12 months. There's other stuff you can do. There's stuff you can do on your own, right? But for a tarot reading, it's a snapshot for quite a bit. And she came in and it was all the same cards and they just slightly moved. And she had a picture and she goes, now I know why you didn't want me to come in. I said, I don't want to take your money twice for the same information. And also as a practitioner, no offense, it's boring to tell you the same story. I like to meet with people when the tectonic plates have shifted and there's something new and that's fun work. So a lot of people reach out when they're at a bit of a crossroads, not like an intense one always, but just like, I don't know, I have a job, I don't love it, or I got laid off, but I don't know what I want to do. I don't want to get back in the same industry, or maybe I had a breakup, but I'm meeting people, it's not clicking. Some people really want to go deeper into the spiritual work, like soul's purpose. What's my sort of mission for being here spiritually? So I do like Akashic record work and some channeling work, and we get their guides in, which is a little bit more of a shamany thing versus just a straight up, telepathic, clairvoyant, psychic thing. I always joke that I stay out of the way. I'm just a broker, and other people come to the meeting, and that's sort of how it works. And so, yeah, and for my practice, I work with what I call, it's sort of a joke, but it's accurate, the spiritually homeless. Like they know there's something going on. They've had experiences, but also they're not buying everybody's bullshit all the time. And so they want someone who's just going to kind of talk straight to them and who's going to say, I don't know. Sometimes like just yesterday, someone asked me a question. I had a big event here at my place in Austin. And I said, I don't know. They go, what do you mean you don't know? I said, I don't know the answer to that question. It's interesting.
Yeah.
And she was so like taken aback that I was willing to say, I don't know. It's just honest. No one knows everything. That's crazy.
I love that though. Like there are certain things you've said. I'm like, oh, thank God she's not a cult leader. Okay. I don't
ever want that kind of pressure. I'm the least likely to be a cult leader. I'm so funny to the point where clients are like, hey, what about this? I'm like, I don't know. Did you Google it? I get so exhausted with that. And I don't need that kind of attention. It would drive me nuts. I was a people manager in corporate. I'm good on that experience for the rest of my life. I mean, I like people as individuals. I love those little sessions, the event, hanging out with my friends who were practitioners was great.
Yeah.
But that is an interesting psychology.
I know that is, but I hear you. Cause so I used to be a teacher trainer for like new teachers in Pilates. And I really, at the time, I really wanted to be that. Like I really wanted to have that experience. I saw something. I wanted to recreate a better experience for every other teacher because my first time was not great. And then after about 6 years of that, I was like, I'm good on that. Like they ask a lot of questions and you do need to have an answer because they're new and they need that. And I got to a place where I'm like, I don't want to have to be that for you. I really want you to be able to like grow and bloom. And so now I have a mentorship, which took me, I dragged my feet, and my team and my coach was like, people want this from you. They want to learn from you. You've had experience. I decided with one of Joe Supply's clients. So I'm one of the few people out there who is close to the source supplies that's out there. And I'm not crazy. So, and I'm kind and so I dragged my feet because I was like, well, I don't want it to be like, it's this way. This is the answer. I really want people to be able to come and explore the information that I have and then integrate it the way they want. And that is what is interesting is that I feel really good about that. But sometimes people have signed up and they're like, well, can you just tell me the answer? And I'm like, so it's not black or white. There's actually, what do you think it is? And it's so interesting because like people can want you to be that for them. And you're like, no, I'm really good here. And it can be hard because of course I want them to get the experience that they want to have, but I can't be the control for them. They have to figure that out themselves.
Right. And you're actually doing the ethical thing, but it is a harder sell. And it's funny, I joke all the time, I sell against myself constantly, right? Yesterday someone said, your spiritual transformation coaching program, it sounds really fun. I said, oh, it's not fun. It's spiritual transformation. And 3 of my clients that are in the program right now, and it's all individual work, but I do it like at the same time we're here, and they started laughing. And the woman goes, well, they look really happy. I go, yeah, but that's like crazy happy. I said, ask them how they're, this is disruptive work. Ultimately, it's very good for you, but it's not a spa. And, and what's funny is people will be intrigued by that. And then I don't have to manage weird expectations that we're off base or whatever. Spiritual work, you're going to see some things and feel some things that are really intense, and not all the time, but like if that's you dipping your toe in, there's a bit of that at the front end. Yeah, for sure. And we're not all like vending machines of answers, right? Like there's a thing in our culture of like, I put the dollar bill in and I push F6 to get the Twix.
I do know that. If you're listening, you know what that means. You're too young for this podcast.
Oh, yeah. And you probably eat healthy. And I used to be a garbage can. I was a raccoon. I would eat out of vending machines all the time.
Oh, yeah. Are you kidding? I mean, I grew up poor and I feel like vending machines are
Me too.
So, I love that you brought that up because it's funny. I feel like it's just generations of like, just get the right answer so that you like, cause it would be embarrassing. You'd embarrass the family if you're wrong. You're embarrassing yourself if you're wrong. It's a failure if you don't have it right the first time. And I feel like only in the last like 7 years of my life, maybe really 5, have I really understood that it's actually really cool if I get the wrong answer. And in my business, of course, I want to make money. I got bills to pay. We got this mortgage now. But we learn so much more from the things that didn't go right in a project than we do when they like we had an event do so fucking amazing in May of 2020. That's why we bought this house. We like literally made a down payment in a weekend. It's what entrepreneurs dream of, right? And we have never recreated it. And in trying to recreate it, we've learned so much. But from that, I'm like, luck and preparation met opportunity at that time. People in May of 2020 wanted the information I had. And so the timing of what I did was exactly right. I couldn't have done it if I wasn't prepared, of course, but we couldn't there. You can't just recreate that extreme moment. You learn more from the mistakes.
And it's funny because, coming from corporate, I was an innovation director. And when you study innovation, you realize a lot of it can never be recreated. And it doesn't mean you're failing. And sometimes you can have the best idea and everything lines up and nobody signs up. And other times you could have kind of a throwaway thing that just booms and then other things come from it. And it's not an indication of your personal failure or achievement one way or the other. Always like being prepared, being organized, being professional. Those are the variables you can control. Yeah. And so those should always be controlled. But the rest of it, part of it is allowing. And that's a really hard thing for high functioning, driven people. And I'm one of those, I'm a workaholic. What it really is a false illusion of control. Like if I work enough, somehow I can control things. You can't. Like you don't think about it consciously that way, but that's really what it is. And being honest with yourself about it. And one of the reasons we had this event, I didn't charge anyone anything. It was a party, literally. Like you're invited to my house. We're going to feed you. My husband's a chef. Here's some drinks. We made drinks out of the flower essence mothers because I make flower essences and had a party. And people were like, well, why are you doing this? I was like, it's the equinox. And, tomorrow's Yom Kippur, happy Yom Kippur or what. Because it needed to happen. I don't know why. Yeah. And we'll see. Yeah. Right. And so I'm learning to like move energy, like move chi sometimes just for the sake of moving it.
Okay. So I love everything you just said there. I can't wait for Brad. My husband will listen to this and then we're going to talk about you on the next episode.
We're both married to Brads, by the way.
I saw that. I saw that.
Yeah.
And mine loves to cook. He's not not an actual chef, but like loves to cook. And so he's the chef in our household because I'm not cooking. But but I love that you brought up allowing. And
Mhm.
I'm wondering, like, can you go into that a little bit more? Because I do think that that's something that especially the women listening to this podcast probably need to do more of. I think we all probably need to. But
I need to do more of it too.
so
Yeah.
what are you doing to allow more? Because I
The big thing, my big case study that gave me permission to do more of it was the Flower Essence Project, which wasn't a Flower Essence Project initially. It was COVID lockdowns in Chicago, chef husband at home. You know, in Chicago, you're in not a house, there's not a yard. And at the time, we weren't allowed to go to parks.
Right.
You know, I'd have a large wolf
we
dog.
were the same. Oh, I was in LA
Yes.
at the time.
There you go.
500 square foot apartment. So I know your life and we could not go
Yes.
outside.
But so where we lived, we had a private balcony and a private roof deck because we were on the top floor and you got that with our unit and you paid for it, but we were busy. We never used it. And then I had a meditation center in a park, like right to the west of where we lived in the West Loop that had a private roof deck. And I said to my husband, you know, I got to get outside. I'm going to freak out. And so let's plant some flowers. Let's do something. And it literally just came like that, attached to nothing else. So we did that. And then because I'm kind of an asshole and I can't just have a hobby, I was like, we should make flower essences. You know, those things that I buy and that we take. And so he's a chef and we're like on Google, you know, being busy, did it. And then I was like, you know, I wonder what it would look like if I put like a totem label, literally just pure sort of play kind of, gave them out as gifts to my friends. They loved them. And then my husband was like, you need to make these and sell them. And so I started doing it. And then I had a client, a really good friend of mine, Claire, shout out to Claire, was like, you got to get on Etsy. I was like, I don't know, Etsy, isn't it like macrame? what is it? And she's like, no. And she's an artist and is doing tremendous work on there. And so I did. And it's a huge part of my business now. And then I studied herbalism and I got certified in herbalism. And then you learn all kinds of other stuff. And I'm telling you, that was just all allowing. I didn't sit down and go, my body of work, my business needs another product. And here's why. And I ran the numbers and I have an Excel spreadsheet about it. There was none of that in it. And it turned a profit the first month. And I didn't know that. I had no idea. But you know, it's intuition matched with, by the way, work. You should see the house. There are tens of thousands of bottles. My friends who stayed with me were like, are you okay? Like mentally? And they're like, no, people make these with you. I was like, no, I listen to a lot of podcasts. Yeah. And I just hand bottle them. And they were like, holy shit.
Yeah. I love that you brought up that like you kind of just, you put like almost like one foot in front of the other. Like I got outside. I liked flowers. I liked learning. Yeah. And you didn't try to control like what the flowers were going to represent before you planted them. And I think that that's something very hard for, I call myself a recovering perfectionist overachiever because I think recovered would mean I'm being perfect about it. But I think that the best things come from, I'm just going to try this out. And too often, either people in your life go, well, how are you going to make money off that? That'll never make any money. How do you do this? What about your kids? What about this? And it's like, you have to turn their dial off and just kind of like go, okay, who am I? I maybe have to protect my hobby or protect my curiosities for a little bit to be mine because yes, everything does cost money and everything, we do need to make more money in this world than we ever had to make to be part of it. But you're not allowing when you try to micromanage what it is before it starts.
And don't listen to the well-meaning morons. When I started Totem,
that's a shirt, Rachel. I hope you have a shirt like that.
You wouldn't believe how mean people who I know liked me and were supportive of me were because they thought it was a disaster, right? And I had a friend, I asked her if she wanted to design the logo and I didn't end up going with her for obvious reasons. You'll hear in a second. She was like, you know, this is crazy and you're never going to be successful and you're never going to be able to do it. And literally, I'm not making that up. It was that like specific and intense. And then I did it. And then she was like, oh, and I was like, right. You know, they couldn't do it. Maybe they don't see it because they're not connected to that. They're not supposed to be manifesting that stuff here. They have their own thing to do. and just giving yourself permission to do. And by the way, in corporate, in tech, the mantra of innovation is fail small, fail early, fail often. It's not never fail. It's not get a crystal ball out and control your entire future. It's the understanding that through doing things, you will learn experientially, and that you'll be able to incorporate that and hone things. Or even if you test a hypothesis and it's faulty, you've learned something. That's a successful experiment, right?
Yes.
And just converting whatever you learn into something of value. And the other thing I would say, though, is when you work like this, you do have to work.
Yeah.
There's no playing around and then not putting in elbow grease, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. I mean, that's the hardest part. I think a lot of people look at other people, they'll look at you or they'll look at me and go, oh, it must be so easy. Or they just like, because I've
never worked harder and I've never had a worse boss, and it's me.
Right. Yeah. I do think I'm kinder than my worst bosses, but I can't be hard on myself. But it's so funny because we have flashcards, which I like are like tarot cards for Pilates exercises, really. That's how, I mean, as a classical teacher, they have an order, but I also tell people, I'm like, just pick a card, just pull a card out. And if you can't do that exercise, like turn it around and see what other exercise is involved in there. And one of the hardest things was not creating the actual card. And I'm sure even for you with, I don't know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like for the tarot part, it's like actually getting the production of the cards, like trying to get somebody in the 2020 to print the cards the way I wanted with the quality of materials I wanted and to ship them to people.
Yeah, I know. And someone gave me a really hard time. I got invited to this book event, and the lady, she was brilliant. She's like a writing coach, publishing coach. She helps people get on TED Talks, stuff like that. She's very successful. And she's like, Rachel, I was on the day for self-publishing because that's what we did. And someone goes, well, you published on Amazon. They're evil. I'm like, hey, it was in the middle of COVID. I'm my only employee. It was with my money. Are you kidding me right now? That's the thing you're going to picayune with me. It was a miracle that we got it done.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're not the publisher. I'm the publisher. It's just on their platform.
Well, and also, guess what, guys? I also am on Amazon. You want to know why? Because people will trust Amazon over my website.
Yes.
It's easy for them.
And I knew I was going to be moving to Texas. I couldn't physically manage the inventory. Like there are pragmatic concerns. And you know, it's that whole, like, there's always someone out there is going to be on. And if nothing else, I will ask everyone to start, if you can, kindly educate people on what it's like to have a small business or to be running a P&L in another larger business. Or I think sometimes people, to your point, they really lack compassion for you in a lot of ways.
Yeah. It's so tricky because you want to like pick and choose your battles, but also like, you know, I think we need to get to a point where we stop judging people for the tools that they're using to get their message out there. Because unfortunately, when you're a small business, there are so many expenses that you don't even think about when you get started. There are money for the newsletter you're sending. There is money for, so it's really, you know, sometimes you have to, and then you can, once you get things out there and you get to test it, you get to see like, what is the feedback? Was this a good idea? What's this? Then you can actually like take it to another place. You know, it's so important that we just have a little bit more compassion for small businesses and also understanding like, there are also avenues out there that just allow us to get our message out there faster. And sometimes we have to use that, especially when you're small.
I mean, I wasn't going to Epstein's Island all the time. I'm not on the flight logs. I just self-published something on Amazon, you know what I mean? During COVID. And so, nuance is important too. Yeah.
Okay, Rachel, I want to ask, like, what are you excited about right now? Like, what is something that you're really excited to be working on?
Oh, well, the big thing I have to say is the podcast. And, you know, this was another thing I did just because I wanted to have discussions with people and share them. Because so much of what I do for a living is I talk to really interesting people in a really intimate, meaningful way. Like there's no small talk in a client session with Totem. And that's not just me. That's people come, they want to talk about their life's purpose, or you know, they're just very honest and vulnerable. And so it occurred to me, like, I know a lot of interesting people and I want people to hear this.
Yeah.
And so I've been doing interviews for season 2 and it's been really fun. And I ask clients to do it because I'm like, you're interesting. They're like, no, I'm not. I'm like, it's enough of this.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's interesting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And working on that. And it's funny because I don't have a producer. My best friend Roger does the audio editing, and I send him like a couple $100 every episode or something. I don't even keep track of it. And people go like, well, you must be like making so much money. I was like, oh my God, no, that's not how podcasts work.
I know.
And they're like, don't you have sponsors? I'm like, do you want to be a sponsor? Be a sponsor. I'd love to talk to you about that. But it's the joy of just doing the thing and seeing that you had an idea. I'm sure you had this feeling too. And then it's actually out there. It's actually happening. People listen to it. It's so exciting.
Yeah.
It feels so good. So I'm really focused on that. We're going to make another deck, actually a flower medicine deck, because of all the flower essences and herbalism. It's the time. Projects like that, you really need block of time. And yeah,
we can talk offline about like the time I set up, because I have the decks that I did. There's 6 decks total, and I really thought I could knock out 2 a year, and we are at 1 a year, folks. and the reality is not because I can't make the time. Like, these are not even spiritual things. These are like things I already have a lot of the content made. I just have to repurpose it. But it's being in that brain space and focusing, and it takes between all the man hours, when I stop counting the man hours, it's usually around 400 or 500 man hours, like between human hours of like my time and editor's time, all this stuff. And so it's just being able to set everything else aside, which means this podcast has to be recorded in advance so that I don't have to do podcasting and my filming for my other thing. It have to be on that's my one project at the moment. And so they take time, but I hear you. We have some systems in place that make it easier for me. And even then it's shaved off like, I don't know, 100 hours, which is not nothing, but that's still
Well, the other thing is, while you're in pure creation on a project like that, unless you have a book deal, which I've been averse to, because of the degree of control.
Yeah.
I have an Aquarius moon. I don't like being told what to do. I have a vision. I'm a little tyrannical about creativity. I don't get paid during that time. And I have to pay to print it and publish it. And so you can create all you want, but you can't do that and then expect everything else to truck along. I always say to people, when you say yes to everything without realizing, you're also saying no to things you're not even thinking about. It's not infinite. You have to prioritize, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So I use all of November and December for this kind of work. I don't do any coaching work. I limit client sessions, and I slow down as the world gets darker and quieter. And I just do stuff like that every year.
I'm excited for your next deck. Take your time.
Thank you. I want it to be nice. We want to make it nice.
Yeah. Yes. And also, especially with things like that, you can't control the creativity either. So like, you also don't want to force it or rush it or put it on some sort of timeline. So,
every card's vision boarded and set up.
Oh my God.
I did that in 2 days. And I'm not on Adderall. This is all natural. This is just crazy.
When you're in the flow, it's true. You don't need Adderall. All right, we're going to take a brief break. We're going to find out where people can find you, follow you, work with you, and get your cards.
Thank you. Yeah. So you can find me at Totem Rach on Instagram. Be prepared to be disappointed. I'm passive aggressive about social media. And totemreadings.com. Just send me an email. All my info is on the website.
Awesome. And that's where we can get your cards, or everything is on the
you can link to it. It's on Amazon. It's the Totem Tarot Deck. And then the Skeptical Shaman is Apple, Spotify, Google, anywhere you listen to podcasts. And season 2 starts the first week in October here.
Perfect. We will link all of that in our show notes. We'll make sure it's everywhere. I'm already intrigued by your deck of cards. I'll have to be hitting Amazon up next. Before I let you go, you've given us like so much awesome advice. I feel like there's been some great gems in there. I always like to ask people this: bold, executable, intrinsic, or target advice people can take to be it till they see it. What do you have for us?
My big one that I'm doing right now, because I also need help, is I am taking a very strict digital detox 1 day a week from everything: television, phone, computer screen. And for me, what that does is I get very clear on what matters. It lowers that cortisol. It lowers the fear, and just I'm very addicted to busyness and noise. Like, I could listen to 18 podcasts a day. You know what I mean? I love consuming noise and creating noise in my own way. And so I've been doing that. And what happens on those days is miraculous. You'll have the big business idea, so you don't have to grind. It's a retreat to move forward. And, if you have goals or anything else, just taking that time, it seems counterintuitive, but you get there faster. You really do.
I
and
love
a lot of
this.
us, when we're working, you're not thinking as deeply as you think you are. You're just not. You're not seeing certain things. It's actually a business imperative. I've decided I have to do that for my business. Yeah.
I love that. Oh, a digital detox. I love it. I have been putting my phone on grayscale at night. And I don't take it off grayscale until I start making after breakfast, because then it's because what happens is inevitably you open up an app and you start working. And I am like you, I could just, I love what I do. So I could just keep doing it. But it's my best days I notice are because the grayscale comes off later in the day. Because as soon as it comes off and it's those beautiful colors and you can see what app that is, you start going there. Yeah. So I really like it. And a whole day, I'm going to see how I can do that. I'm going to challenge myself by the time this episode
It's like
comes
intermittent fasting. It really is. It's a great way to reset. And I have better ideas when I'm not just doing, when I'm not in tactical execution. And I don't have the discipline to not tactically execute unless it's all shut off. So
I one more thing on this. When I travel internationally, I would never pay the phone company to let me use my phone internationally. Because I'm like, there's Wi-Fi. If I need it, I'll get Wi-Fi. It's, where am I going? And my recent trip to Poland, I was annoyed. My husband didn't come with me. The other trip, and he'll listen to this, because he'll say it. He'll be the one that gets the phone to work. And so I'm like, of course I can be safe, because he's good.
Yes.
But I realized that because my phone worked in between being at a hotel or the conference center, I was struggling to be as present as I could, just walking down these beautiful streets I hadn't been in. And I was like, oh, it's because my phone works and I can get a text message and I can get this. And I was like, okay, we're just going to go on airplane mode intentionally so that we can be present. So I thank you for sharing that. Thank you for all of this. I am so excited about what you're doing. You're everything I wanted to be in the tarot shaman world. It's so fun to be like, oh, I can have some crystals and do logic. Thank you so much, Rachel.
Thank you.
Everyone, how are you going to use these tips in your life? When are you going to go on a digital detox? And also, what were your favorite parts about this? Make sure you tag Rachel, tag the Be It Pod so we can share it. And until next time, be it till you see it.
That's all I got for this episode of the Be It Till You See It podcast. One thing that would help both myself and future listeners is for you to rate the show and leave a review. And follow or subscribe for free wherever you listen to your podcast. Also, make sure to introduce yourself over at the Be It Pod on Instagram. I would love to know more about you. Share this episode with whoever you think needs to hear it. Help us and others be it till you see it. Have an awesome day.
Be It Till You See It is a production of the Bloom Podcast Network.
It's written, filmed, and recorded by your host, Lesley Logan, and me, Brad Kroll.
It is produced and edited by the epic team at Diseño.
Our theme music is by Ali at Apex Production Music, and our branding by designer and artist Gianfranco Cioffi.
Special thanks to Melissa Solomon for creating our visuals and Samena Velazquez for our transcriptions.
Also to Angelina Herrico for adding all the content to our website, and finally to Meredith Crowell for keeping us all on point and on time.